I know it's college football season, but UConn recruiting season never sleeps. You're locked on UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just want to take a moment to ask for a small favor. If you're enjoying the content, please take a second to subscribe to the show. Follow the audio versions wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, I don't care. Wherever you get it, it really helps the show grow. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the support. It means the world to me. Also, every follow, every subscription on YouTube or audio download of the podcast helps create more revenue for UConn NIL. Locked On UConn is giving a 10% donation to Bleeding Blue for Good. So by supporting Locked On UConn, you directly affect the UConn athletic program. So thank you so much for being a part of this community. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, on today's program, we're going to keep talking about UConn. We're essentially going to do a recap of yesterday's show, but we brought in a special guest, Jack Weingartner, from the founder of Stock Risers. Jack, let me ask you the first question out of the gates. I predicted that we're going to land Darius Adams, that we're going to add Niko Bundalo, and that we're going to add Acaden Lewis. How accurate do you think that is? And we're just how accurate do you think that is?
I mean, it's definitely a possibility. There's a bunch of different scenarios you can look at, especially with the caliber guys they're going after and who they're going after. Obviously Darius Adams, with the whole visit schedule change, he's on campus this week. Something worth noting with him though, his high school teammate Jalen Harrelson visited Michigan State this past weekend, and now they got Darius heading to Michigan State this weekend. So that's a little package that could be in the back of your mind, but as far as Acaden Lewis, that's going to be a battle till the end, to compete with Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina. There's been a lot of Kentucky rumblings, behind the scenes and obviously in the public. Niko Bundalo, though, is a guy that UConn fans should definitely feel great about. He's a guy that I've said publicly is a top 10 player in the country. He's so fun to watch, and I think a dynamic of him and Coach Hurley would be electric.
Plus, his dad has a ponytail. I said that on the show yesterday. They were doing, I mean, come on, dude. That dude needs to be on social media all day. Our fans would have a blast with that.
Yeah, I saw his dad maybe 3 months ago in the gym, and the ponytail is rocking, man. So he would definitely just be electric to have him and his family, with Hurley and just a part of the UConn nation. I think it would be cool to see.
So let's stick on him. He's 6'10", 6'11", can play, both sides of the floor equally as well. He's a rim protector, but he's a little different than what the bigs that UConn has had in the past. Can you tell UConn fans, if they were to land Niko, what to expect?
Obviously, just like you said, the length and the versatility, but I think the biggest aspect of his game is his playmaking and just his ability to create space. And obviously on the offensive end, if you are going into a UConn, he'd be in a situation where he'd actually be able to create for others a little more. At the high school level, it's different. Not that he doesn't have great talent around him. He did last year at Western Reserve, but, I saw him play with a, limped up Western Reserve squad last summer, and he had two 30-point games, but, he was also able to play make. I think, just the dynamic at 6'10", but also being able to score from the mid-range and also stretch and shoot the three ball. He's an electric player, simply put. It's the reason I think he's a top 10 caliber player, and just the energy and the high motor he brings. He's got, a lot of crazy aspects of his game that, I think make him a top 10 player in the nation.
Okay. Let me ask you a question before we get to the next segment. What are some things that you maybe have heard? Because you always hear all the positive stuff, right? All the positive things that you hear about UConn. and Hurley and what he creates and the atmosphere that he's creating at UConn, the culture, the tenacity. Has there been a player that's like, man, that place is not for me? Have you heard that yet at all?
Yeah, but not in a negative way.
Okay.
There's guys around the country that, some of them like that pressure of, going into a national championship contender and trying to compete right away. Like Stephon Castle is a great example. He was built for UConn, simply put, just like Donovan Clingan. But to be a one and done player like Steph was, and to go in and bring that intensity, there's guys that are built for it, and some guys, would rather go to, maybe a different high major that isn't like a UConn and be able to step in right away, because not everyone's situation is going to be like Stephon Castle, simply put. So, some guys have said, maybe it's not for me. Hurley's intense. He might not play me right away. But then there are obviously guys that are like, oh, yeah, I would love to play for a guy like that. And, just an area and a town that bleeds UConn. It's a special place. But at the same time, there's a lot of pressure that comes with it, and it's not for everybody.
That's for sure. I said it yesterday. Winning's not for everybody, and I don't mean that joking around like the Nike ad, but it's just it is what it is. We're gonna come back with Jake. We're gonna go pay some bills and make sure I keep my job. Coming up after this. Hey, UConn fans. This is something brand new. Have you heard of ROY? It stands for Return on You. It's a new platform that lets you get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athlete. So by supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain top talent, and keep your favorite athletes from entering the transfer portal. As we all know, NIL has changed the game for athletes, and ROY is changing the NIL game for fans. Here's where ROY is different. No risk contributions. Fans contribute securely, and they're held and only distributed if the athlete makes the decision that aligns with the fan support. So if they stay at the school, they get the money that you donated. If not, the money is returned to the fan. You also get to engage with the athletes on their NIL journey by using ROY. Fans not only support athletes financially, but also become part of the NIL journey, helping them succeed both on and off the field. So this difference really feels like instead of giving money to a collective with ROY, you can directly throw your money to a specific player or a UConn athlete. Download ROY for iOS or Android and enter referral code Locked On to automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. Visit joinroy.com for more details. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with ROY. Okay, we're going to get Roy off the stage here. Thank you for being back with us on Locked On UConn with Jake Weingartner, founder of Stock Risers. Okay, so I opened the show yesterday talking about some intel I got about Braylon Mullins. He's my number one recruit because he is exactly who Dan Hurley wants. He is the type of player that I feel like he feels like as he's rising now to a 5-star, that he can mold into the type of player like a Cam Spencer, but more athletic, like a Tristan Newton, but more athletic, probably more like an Andre Hawkins, who was a lottery pick. So what do you think about that first? And then let's talk about his recruiting.
Obviously an Indiana kid. I lived in the South for 4 years, so I got my taste of Indiana basketball. They love it down there. And a kid like that, we just talked about the intensity that Dan Hurley brings. I think Braylon Mullins would fit that mend perfectly. And you just brought up a great point. A Cam Spencer, more athletic. And, as somebody who's been watching circuits and traveling, watching basketball for almost a decade, the combination of athleticism and just being able to shoot the ball, I'm not going to say it's rare, but, it's a combination that you don't find often. And like you said, Braylon just continuing the rise. From a recruiting standpoint, Mike Woodson's been doing a fantastic job, recently at Indiana. And, the assistant coaches there are great as well. So, in my opinion, it'll be very tough to compete with Indiana. But if anyone can do it, it's Dan Hurley and the UConn basketball program. But Braylon's a great player. And like you said, a guy that's continuing to rise to, 5-stardom.
So the story I got yesterday was that Dusty May is sniffing around because he's an Indiana alum, that Dusty and Braylon's dad have a good relationship, that really kind of, this isn't from Braylon directly, so I don't know if this is true. This is just what I've heard, is that essentially, as you mentioned, Mike Woodson is the coach in Indiana. Hasn't had a ton of success at Indiana. I think that plays into this decision. If Indiana had a Dusty May there or a coach that was more of an elite college coach, I think it's over. I think he's an Indiana Hoosier.
Mm-hmm.
Is that why Dan Hurley is being able to kind of get his paws on this and essentially almost take him away from Indiana potentially?
I wouldn't say a situation like that would necessarily, be the reason Dan Hurley's, gotten kind of an uptick here. But, it's obviously something that, has been spoken about, behind the scenes is, why UConn, why Indiana. I don't think Dusty May will leave Michigan, and I don't think Mike Woodson will be done yet. I think what he's been able to build this year and just the traction he has in his 2025 class down in Indiana. You look at Trent Sisley, Jalen Harrelson, and the wide group of prospects that he's recruiting in 2025. I don't think the Michigan smoke is true. I do think, Dan Hurley's just Dan Hurley. I honestly think he can, be involved in any recruitment he'd like. Obviously he'll recruit guys that fit the culture, fit the program. But, if it was in the control of, an outsider or somebody, that's just a fan, and you were to tell Dan Hurley, go recruit this guy, if he did it, he'd be, on the top of the list or somewhere near it. So I do think this is going to be a UConn-Indiana competition. And, sorry to UConn fans, but I do ultimately think he will end up staying at Indiana, but you can never count out this UConn staff.
Yeah, I think I said that yesterday. So you're not telling them something that they haven't heard. I don't
Right.
give them sunshines and rainbows. This is just it is what it is. I mean, it was always going to be a tough to get this kid out of the Midwest, away from his hometown, his home state's team. Right? Everybody grows up and wants to be a Hoosier, and now he's in that possibility, and he's going to get paid handsomely to do it. So it's hard to pull away from that. Okay, here's a name that I want to discuss because it is so important. Malik Thomas was this up here with UConn. It's kind of started to drop a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Is the overtime elite stuff the reason why?
No. Overtime elite's never been, interference with, college recruiting, not until, the NIL landscape changed. I think, it's just an opportunity for guys to, get out there and play better competition or, just play against other 5-stars. But, with those overtime guys, that whole company, there are, specific relationships they have with specific colleges. You could think of like Arkansas, when Cal was at Kentucky, he had a great relationship with the OT people, obviously got Carter Knox while he was there. And had Samto Cyril committed until he ended up going to Georgia. But, I don't think that has anything to do with it. I just think, when we discussed earlier that, some guys, like to be the guy and, other guys, wouldn't mind, being next to 3 or 4 or 5-stars. Malik's amazing. One of the best in the country. I do think he could be a guy that could end up at, like, for example, like a Syracuse, where maybe they don't have so many 5-stars around them, obviously pending what they do the rest of the cycle. But I do think he's going to be a one and done guy that anticipates going in and, being able to have the ball in his hands. And he would have the ball in his hands at UConn, of course, but, so would 3 or 4 other guys. So, obviously it looked great after his official visit. And, a couple months ago, people were saying it was a lock.
Yep.
I do think
Myself
it's still
included.
I do think it's still under consideration. He's a great player. But I could see him possibly landing elsewhere. But that's just another situation where you're not going to know till the end. But I could see him, landing elsewhere.
Yeah. You mentioned the Michigan State stuff with Darius Adams. I mean, with Malik, he's got Steph Castle in his ear talking about coming to UConn. So, I think that was also part of the reason why we were like, oh, this kid's definitely going to come. getting the number 4 pick in the draft to tell you this is the best place for you. But and I don't mean it like Overtime Elite is causing this. I mean, they're known to go with more programs that NIL is more of a factor. On Dan Hurley's list, NIL is like 7th on the list.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're even if it's like 2nd on your list, he's like, we're good.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. All right, man. Listen, I'm going to take one more break, and then I want to hear a little bit more about some of my predictions, what your thoughts are, and then get just like a quick overview about recruiting around the country, just to give UConn fans maybe some fuel to the fire to kind of figure out which teams we have to start worrying about with Kansas. Some of our Big East folks like Creighton, maybe we'll talk about coming up after this. All right, everybody, you've heard us talk about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. We'll have something a little different for you. We talked about it. It's our title sponsor today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and you get a 3 free week trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket. It's a hell of a deal, and that's from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just go visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook. Okay, we're back. Last segment of the program with Jake Weingartner, founder of StockRisers.com, joining us today. Jake, you gave us some really good thoughts on Niko Bundalo, Darius Adams, Malik Thomas, Braylon Mullins. Talk to me about Acaden Lewis. I know you mentioned a little bit how tough it would be against Duke, North Carolina, but I think the prevailing theme is when Malik started to kind of favor more of maybe some of the Overtime Elite relationships he's made, Arkansas, others, that Acaden Lewis was the target, right? They visited him after the White House trip. He commented about how like that was an ultimate recruiting flex to come straight from the White House, essentially. They did the same thing with Eric Reibe. Talk about those two players they targeted just after the White House trip.
I'll start with Caden. First and foremost, his rise to where he's at now, it's been awesome to watch. I first interviewed him and interacted with him over 2 years ago, and to see where he's, made leaps now, it's phenomenal. And that's obviously the reason why Dan Hurley wants him so bad. Like I said, it's going to be tough. But as we've said, the theme of the show has been, if anyone can do it, Dan Hurley can. And obviously,
hold on, Jake. Let me stop you right there because I want to ask you like the differences in like the schools he's going. He's got all 4. He's got 4 blue bloods,
right?
Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, and us.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's the pitch for? I want to know your thoughts on what you've heard. What are the pitches for the other teams? Because we all know Dan Hurley's going to come and say, "Listen, you come here, we're going to win championships together. I'm going to turn you into an elite NBA player." Is it similar? Like, how do they counteract that? That's what I want to
know. Obviously with NIL, it's part of the pitch, but the on the court stuff. I mean, you look at North Carolina. Their style of recruiting is definitely different than per se like a Duke. But with that being said, I think Hubert Davis's pitch is a little more different than what Roy Williams' pitch was. Roy Williams would like to bring a guy in and have him stay for multiple years. I think Hubert's more open to the one and done stuff now. He's got Drake Powell and Ian Jackson on his roster now. Both guys will likely be one and done. I think Ian's a lock to be a one and done. So I think the UNC pitches, you come in and, with RJ Davis leaving after the season, you'll have the opportunity to come in and, be our lead guard or be one of our guards out there and really have a chance to, be a part of a blue blood and have a high impact. And then a program like Duke, you know what it is. You're going to come in and you want to be a one and done. Coach Schreier doesn't care. Be one and done. You saw what it was with Jared McCain. He said he came in and didn't know how long he'd be at Duke. But if we're being honest, Jared McCain was a 5-star, top 20 prospect, one of the best scorers in the country. Acaden's in a similar boat as him. Come in, see what you can do. But, Duke's pitches come in, be you, and you'll have a chance to leave in 6 months. And then Kentucky, I think Kentucky's a little different from all the blue bloods. Mark Pope's style is different. He's going from BYU to Kentucky. I don't think he's just, changing his recruiting style or his coaching style, right away. He'll obviously adjust to now being recruiting for Kentucky and not BYU, which is drastically different. But, I think for him, it's come in and you're going to be our guy. I do think Acaden Lewis and Jasper Johnson is what Mark Pope is pitching. Come in and you two can change this program. Obviously, UK has been in great hands for the last, 15, 20 years, but, they want to win national championships. They haven't done that in quite some time. So I think the pitches, we'll have two, young guards that can come in and change the program. So, I do think everyone's pitch is different, but I do think at the end of the day, they're all saying the same thing. You can come in and, be a one and done guard here.
Yeah. And I will say this from the UConn side, I don't know Dan Hurley personally, but I would imagine Dan Hurley is saying something to the effect of all the other schools are telling you what you can do if you come here. But we already know what we can do because we've done it the last 2 years, and you saw that. So you just joining this is just being a part of the process. So we know that we can win championships. We've proven it. The other teams are hoping that you change their program. We don't need change. We're good.
Right. And I think to add to that, we mentioned before, not everyone could go into a UConn and be able to adjust to, obviously everyone wants to win, but being a part of winning culture and what it takes and the sacrifice, I think Acaden Lewis is built for that. He was cut in middle school, didn't make JV. He really had to sacrifice and earn where he is. And I think Dan Hurley loves those guys with a chip on their shoulder. Hassan Diarra is a guy who grew up 5 minutes from me. I have a great relationship with him. He's a good friend of mine. That's a guy played with a chip on his shoulder, didn't get an opportunity at A&M to do what he wanted to do. And now he's pretty much the leader of, back-to-back national championship squad. And, I think Acaden Lewis fits the mold of a guy like Hassan Diarra's intensity, but would obviously have the chance to be a one-and-done player at the same time.
You're so spot on, man. Like when we were doing profiles of these players a few months back, Solo Ball is another one. Guy was like 5'5" forever, and then had a growth spurt, and that's Dan Hurley's style. It's like I want the guy who plays like he's still 5'5", but is actually 6'4" and can jump through the gym. So those are the guys he looks for. So that's a great comment. Real quick, Eric Reibe. It looks like Kansas is the leader in the clubhouse, so to speak. Talk about his recruitment. I know UConn's high on him as well for obvious reasons. Can step out and shoot it a little bit as a 7-footer. What are your thoughts?
I would say not so fast on the Kansas stuff.
Okay. Breaking news.
First of all, Reibe's an amazing kid. I've been able to, build a relationship with him the last few weeks and, talk to him a lot. And, this stuff's really been heating up. I did write a 600-word article on him last week, just about everything going on in his recruitment. Obviously, there were some visits moved up, but I think the important thing is the coaches that are coming in to see him. Mike Woodson's been in to see him. I know that. Craig McDermott was an interesting one because there's a lot of people at Creighton that, messaged me specifically and said, people on our end thought that was done. People thought that the blue blood stuff was too hard to compete with. But I don't think Greg McDermott agrees with that. I think, Greg McDermott's going in and saying, look what Kalkbrenner's done here. He's one of the best bigs in the nation. He's paid like a two-way NBA player. He's been the forefront of our program, and you can be that. I think that's their pitch. Oregon's also a school that, has done very well and has made really good ground. Dana Altman was the first coach to go see Reibe when the live period opened. And Eric told me that they did have an assistant come in right after that. So obviously everyone's pushing tabs and keeping tabs. Kansas had an assistant last week. Bill Self will be in Wednesday, as I reported yesterday. And Coach Hurley, he'll be there Thursday. So this thing's really not slowing down. The White House visit, I can tell you, stood out. and it's hard not to stand out. You're going from being at the White House to I know people hate Dan Hurley for that, especially other coaches.
I mean, listen, he's coming in his suit.
You can't.
It's the ultimate pimp move. It's such a OG move to just come in and you're in your best dress suit. You just saw the president thanking you for telling you how great you are. And we're gonna stop by. Yeah, we're just gonna stop by and check in on one of our targets.
Yeah, it's a major flex, but I don't think this is a Kansas race to beat.
Okay.
I do think it's anybody's ball game right now. I do think he's going to make a major leap in all rankings. I think he could go as high as top 20. To get a 7-footer, he's played in FIBA. He's got a smooth lefty jumper. His length and versatility is ridiculous. I mean, at Top 100 camp a couple of months ago, he was probably the best rebounder there. And you're going against guys that are also 5-stars and guys that are highly ranked at their position. And Dan Hurley loves his 7-footers. For them to be able to get a guy, I wouldn't say he's like Donovan Clingan. They have their similarities, but I don't think they're really the same. I think Eric's obviously a little more slimmer, a little bit more mobile on his feet, 3-level scorer. The rebounding and the blocking ability is the similarity he has with Clingan, but also the fire he brings. I just think he'd be able to come in and have an impact right away. He's so skilled for a 7-footer, and the combination of being dynamic and also being versatile and being able to run the floor at 7 foot. It's just super impressive. And I think that's why his recruitment's ramping up.
Well, we were going to have a conversation around national recruiting, but I don't care. That was awesome. I really appreciate you coming on. So just for everybody listening, thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Obviously free everywhere. For your second listen, go check out Locked On College Football. From NAL deals to never-ending conference realignment, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for exciting season on the gridiron. Find Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. For Jake Weingartner, founder of Stock Risers, come visit us again. We're asking you to stay locked in, stay connected, make sure that toughness meter is always rising. And as always, go Huskies.